Actually, Lucas based it on the Jedi, an ancient order of Egyptian priest warriors who wore hooded robes. Creator of Star Wars, George Lucas, got his inspiration for the concept of the Jedi from the Jedi pillars in ancient Egyptian culture and mythology. The way of the Jedi is the way of the Force, which pre-existed George Lucas and the epic Star Wars saga. Ancient Egyptians, Sufis and Knights Templar mastered the way of the Jedi, Kundalini or life force. Those who were adept at the way of the Jedi were known as Jedi. George Lucas dropped the D when he began production of Episode 4 in the 70s. A Jedi was a devotee to the ways of the Jedi Order, an ancient order of protectors united by their ability to harness the power of the Force. There has always been a question regarding the Force and whether it is one or the dual sides we see sometimes in the films. The answer is that the Force has always been one, from the start of the universe. It was the spark that surrounded and penetrated the small dense ball of elements that make up the universe today. There is the cosmic force, which is the clockwork cycle of all the universal bodies. Then there is the living force that is amongst the nature of our world. The Mother Nature is the example many give. Like the wind, we feel it but cannot see it, same as gravity. It's an energy that works on a different frequency that allows the manipulation of ESP powers. The dark side is not of the Force, but is only a way of explaining the abuse that these Dark Lords wield. They abuse the Force for their own will. Lucas gets his inspiration from Egypt for both Star Wars and Indiana Jones. We know that he uses the old Egyptian word that described the ancient warrior monk magicians that were the true guardians of another civilization. This more ancient world was destroyed by some type of cataclysm, which is also when the ancient Guradians fell to a darkness like no other. Although the whole event has been lost to history, we know so much about it through the many ancient writings. From all around the world we have the same events described, even in the Bible. The flood story is known in all cultures as the end of an age called the Golden Age. Plato writes about the same with Atlantis, although the actual place was wiped off the face of the planet. Only the megalithic structures that later peoples inherited, such as the Great Pyramids of Giza and most of Egypt. So too, in South America and India, as well as many other places. The Jedi of Egypt were the noble knights that provided peace and justice for all, with many different names. They are known about through the ancient texts of Egypt and other cultures. Osiris and Thoth, although not gods but more like heroes of the same, were honored in many cultures. Mayans also note the Orion constellation, and was known as the Skywalker. In Egypt the Great Pyramids were built perfectly on the three belt stars, and associated with Osiris. The great enemy of Osiris and even kills him, is in fact Set, which is where we get the name Sith later on in Hebrew and Greek. In recorded history, the secrets of the Force of the Jedi Knights were first taught among the Egyptian Jedi or Jedi, who may have received them from a much earlier prehistorical Jedi Knight order, perhaps one from Atlantis. One Jedi priest mentioned in the Egyptians' Westcar papyrus is said to have possessed the key that opened the secret chambers of the sanctuary of Thoth, who many esoteric historians believe was a missionary and master of the Force from Atlantis. The Jedi was also the pillar, as in pillar of the community, which symbolized stability and the backbone of society. They are those who, regardless of race or creed, are awakening to mission in service to the planet. We see the Jedi pillar in the lightsabers from the A New Hope, and it is known that these Jedi used some kind of energy staff called Wasa rods. The word wizard comes from those who held the staff of power, which was called the WSR, Wasa. Orza was the life force within nature. Ironically enough, the idea of completing the circle with ritual and of finding balance in awareness was known in ancient Kemet as raising the Jedi. Some Jedi are found in the service of the Pharaoh that Moses and Aaron confronted in order to demand freedom for the Hebrews. The Westcar papyrus mentions the magician Jedi, who was a student of Thoth, and would later named the order after him. Records of them survive in certain countries, such as Egypt and Persia, where they were magician priests, and the guardians of powerful priest kings similar to the Emperor of Star Wars, albeit without his predilection for the dark side. The pillar would be raised during initiation ceremonies, when students of the mystery schools had completed their skills. Indiana Jones film even has Lucas place the two well-known droids within the Egyptian texts. Guardians of the secrets called the Hall of Records, and the protectors of enlightened priest kings who lived at least 1,000 years before King Arthur, and his Knights of the Round Table. This alternate history of Arthur and his knights was recently made into a major motion picture entitled King Arthur, starring Clive Owen as the British monarch. The Jedi secrets of the Force possessed by the early Persian kings and their knights were preserved within Persian civilization as popular legend for many hundreds of years. The Knights Templar also inherited the Gnostic teachings of the Johannite Gnostic Church, which has been passed down to them from a series of Grand Masters beginning with John the Baptist, Jesus, John the Apostle, and Mary Magdalene. The Knights Templar would subsequently create their own Holy Grail mystery school tradition comprised of numerous levels. The Force, the Knights Templar were to discover, was the true Holy Grail, or at least the lost records. The Templars' secrets of the Force eventually passed into some of the secret societies of Europe, including the Rosicrucians and Freemasons, and for a while this wisdom survived in its purity. But it would eventually become grossly distorted, hidden or completely forgotten, and the era of the Jedi Knights would come to a grinding halt. But now, certain Templar organizations are making a concerted effort to resurrect the Jedi Knights' wisdom of Egypt, Persia, and the early Templars. The old Gnostic and alchemical rites are beginning to be observed again, and the hidden alchemical texts are being pursued in places like Rosslyn Chapel and Languedoc in France. For nearly 1,000 years the Knights Templar have rightly been regarded the eternal guardians of the Holy Grail, but what the Holy Grail actually is has never been accurately revealed until now. Guardians of the Holy Grail proves that the Holy Grail existed many thousands of years before Christ, and that it is as old as the Garden of Eden itself. The theory from older texts has Jesus himself being taught, and is why the Nativity speaks of the Magi coming to his birth. Plus Jesus he is last heard of going to Egypt, before coming back to renounce the Hebrew God. The destruction of the temple, the secret teaching and the sermons that included that a God doesn't live in a temple. Some texts claim that Jesus was in fact trying to rescue his people from the darkness of Yahweh, but only later he claimed the son of him by the Romans. This is consistent with the events at the time too, as it was the temple's priesthood who called Jesus a heretic, but due to the editing of the Bible much is lost. We do know that if it were the temple priests who punished him, he would have been stoned in accordance with the laws. Although it is the Roman punishment of crucifixion that we see in the Gospels, which only a major crime would suffice such punishment. Jesus was known in other texts as a rebel, not just against the Hebrew God, but to the Roman emperor who saw himself as a god. Claimed he came with a sword. The story of his marriage to Mary, and had children, was covered in other texts that became heresy later and destroyed. It was Mary who would be the one to take over after Jesus' death, before escaping to France with their children. So Egypt gives us the main clues, with the Jedi and their enemy Set. It would seem a coincidence if not, but with Lucas using Egypt for Indiana Jones twice too, including one after the Holy Grail, is somewhat obvious. Thoth, although not a god but was known as the teacher of the Force.
Execute Order 60, 60, 66, 60, 60, 60.